Welcome back to the Cannes Film Festival 2023 Parallel Challenge here on Fantasy Film Ball. We are your hosts, Matt and Arnaud.
That means we're watching an equivalent film to all 21 competition titles at Cannes this year. So in this video, this last video, we are doing The Angel's Share and The Old Oak by British director Ken Loach.
I'm very excited to be talking about the oldest director at Cannes this year, the 86-year-old British master of social realism, Ken Loach. Loach, I think, is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He has consistently been working since the 1960s. He's now in his late 80s, and he's still devoted to making the same type of films, ones that show working class British life, often using improvisation, non-actors, non-traditional scripting techniques. He made his first masterpiece in 1969, a film called CANNES, which is viewed by many as one of the greatest British films ever made, and a landmark in the British kitchen sink realism movement, which he was fundamental in founding. He's arguably the most successful director in the history of Cannes. He has had, I think, around 12 films in competition at Cannes, and he has won
13.
awards with 13, and he's won awards with, I think, 6 of those films. And he has won the Palme d'Or twice. Once in 2006 for The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and in 2016 for I, Daniel Blake. In other words, he's a fucking legend.
The Angel's Share follows Robbie, who narrowly avoids jail and is tasked hours of community service instead. Through one of the organizers, he learns about the art of distillery and whiskey making and develops a knack for telling various kinds apart and such. With a team of other community playback group members, he tries to figure out a plan to get himself out of the shithole he's put himself in and get a new, better life for his wife and newborn son. This is much more of a feel-good film from Ken Loach, and I'm not complaining. Especially since the film never really feels glossy or tailor-made the way a studio film might. It's still very much his style, and the characters he presents us are nothing new. But here, the tone is much more lighthearted, in large part because the story isn't trying to critique an institution so much as it is just kind of telling a man's story. It's very straightforward and efficient in its shooting style, but Loach always shines more with his actors, in my opinion. They all feel very natural in this. The dialect is really pitch perfect, and they're really, really fun to listen to.
I just loved this movie. I loved the more feel-good approach that we got it. A lot of Loach's strongest films tackle institutions, but I feel like if you're making kitchen sink realist films, where the reason the whole movement is called kitchen sink is because a critic watched one of the films and said, they're really showing us everything but the kitchen sink. If you're showing us everything but the kitchen sink, then you have to show us everything, and you can't all just focus on the sad elements of real life in the working class. You also have to give us some of the happiness, some of the joy, some of the comedy. And this is a great example of a realist comedy, something that is uplifting, funny, energetic, without ever losing that commitment to being grounded in the lives of real working class people. And it reminds me a lot of films like Pride or Billy Elliot, where those films are studio-driven social realist movies. They're comedies about the British working class, but in those films, which imitate Ken Loach, they sometimes cash in on cliche, while this one never really does. It's authentic through and through. I will say I like Pride and Billy Elliot, but they're just imitating Ken Loach. This is really Ken Loach. This is the real deal. But I really wish I had subtitles on my copy of this film. Oh my god, it was hard to understand at times. I love the Scottish, but dear Lord, you are hard to understand sometimes.
For The Angel's Share, I was fortunate enough to have subtitles, and yes, I did need them. Something I actually kind of like is that towards the end of the film, this kind of turns into a heist film of sorts. I'm not going to say more than that to kind of spoil the surprise or the intrigue. Be aware of that, I guess. Loach has been open about not being a big cinephile, and I don't take that as something against him. It makes a lot of sense, I think, when you see his films, but I do think it shows a little bit negatively in some of his impulses and decisions on this film, for instance. I'm thinking especially of the music choices, which is very bland to me and adds almost nothing to the film. Some music that feels like it's just kind of copied from existing temp music or existing tracks from other films. But I did really enjoy this film overall. Haven't seen too many Loaches. This may actually be my least favorite, but I have loved all the ones that I've seen, so this is not an insult in the slightest.
Are you telling me you don't like hearing 500 100 miles by the proclaimers over and over and over again. But yeah, I can definitely see how Ken Loach not being a big film guy definitely has led to some less interesting cinematic choices. But at the same time, I think him not being a cinephile is why his films are so special. They're not influenced by the cinema, they're influenced by life. While that might lead him to making some less interesting choices, I also think if every director was really copying from other films, it'd be a pretty sad world for cinema, because you need the Ken Loaches of the world that don't know anything about movies to make movies in order to get the Tarantinos of the world that only know movies and nothing else. So you need a balance of the two, and I think Ken Loach's brand of not being a cinephile and not knowing anything about movies and just making movies is part of what makes him so special and so unique. But I am sad to hear that this is your least favorite Loach, because I just loved it. I had a blast the entire way through. Definitely one of my favorite films of the entire challenge. It's a genuinely great time.
So let's talk about The Old Oak, which is the name of the film, but also the film's titular pub that has been running for many decades, even if it's seen less and less business through the days. This is in part because it is located in a mining town whose industry is now basically dead. However, immigrants are placed in this town temporarily, and the pub's landlord will be faced with their presence and needs. I get the sense, though, from what I hear, that this relationship will be more amicable and less xenophobic. It's not clear to me if this is more of a social issue Loach, where we have these characters who eventually reach a tragic fate, or if this is more of an uplifting Loach. Also of note, this is almost certainly Loach's last film. Like you said, he's 86 and apparently losing his sight.
That's really sad. He's one of the filmmakers that I just think should live forever. Him, Scorsese, Agnes Varda was in that category. There's so many filmmakers that you just want to stay around forever because their films mean so much to the world of cinema. Honestly, if this is his last film, I hope that he can end on an uplifting note. He's done so many great tragedies through his career, but I kind of want him to leave his career on a hopeful note, that humanity can get its shit together rather than hopelessness, as so often happens in his films. But this is easily one of my most anticipated of the fest. Whether or not it is a prize winner, whether or not it is a major work for Ken Loach, I just love this filmmaker.
If I had to bet on it, I think this doesn't win a prize. It's the last film to play in competition, which is not necessarily a death sentence for winning a prize, but, you know, something tells me this is not a major Loach. His last film didn't win a prize. Sure, The Angel's Share did win a prize, but Loach has been in competition 13 times now, like you mentioned, and has won a prize only about 6 times. On average, he walks away with nothing more than half the times. I'm excited to see it, of course. This doesn't impact my hype for it. Loach and Leverdy, which is his go-to screenwriter, never make uninteresting films, in my view.
Actually, because you say he's done it half of the time, so this will be his 14th time in competition, correct? And he's won a prize 6 times. His last time here, he didn't win, which means he's due for another to get him a perfect 50% batting average. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they do what they did for the Dardennes last year and they give him a special prize. Knowing it might be his last film, here you go. Here is a special Palme d'Or. But anyways, thank you so much for joining us on the Parallel Challenge. This is the final video in the series in terms of videos reviewing films, but make sure you join us for our next video because we are going to be predicting the awards at the Cannes Film Festival, and then the video after that we are going to be revealing our own picks for the Cannes Awards based on our Parallel Challenge right here. Make sure you join us for those 2 videos, and thank you so much for joining us through the Cannes Parallel Challenge. It's been a lot of fun. As always, thank you for watching.